Hi, everybody. Back at the EBnet podcast booth at this year's IRFA conference. I'm joined by Michelle Acton from Old Mutual, who has just given an absolutely spectacular presentation on two-pot and some of the policy reforms we can look forward to. But I'm not going to take the words out of her mouth. I'd rather let her share with us the kind of high-level summary of her presentation.
Sure, thanks, Natalie. So I think the first phase or the first part of my presentation was covering really about some of the short-term and long-term learnings we've had, well, not really that long-term, but what we can expect from two-pot. And I think some of the key takeouts was it was a hugely successful implementation. It demonstrates what we can do as an industry collaborating across all stakeholders. And how quickly we can actually deliver as an industry. And I always joke of this being an old industry with a weak change muscle, but I think two-pot demonstrated that we've managed to exercise that change muscle and bring in quite a bit of change. So with that sort of context, this big question is, so what's next? And I think that becomes really important because two-pot's helping us with the leakage problem we've had in our system. But the next phase is really ensuring that we can get the coverage. How do we get more working South Africans into the retirement fund industry? And the second element is adequacy. How do we make sure people are actually contributing enough?
You touched on something that I wanted to explore more with you, and that is on digitalization of the industry. So far at today's conference, certainly the sessions I've been attending, you were the first to raise this. And without revealing any of your corporate IP or any of your exciting things that I'm sure are going to come out of Old Mutual, off the top of your head or very high level, what digital innovation can we expect?
Sure. So I think a lot of my theme, we've all as administrators, fund officers, working in the retirement fund space, it's really important we bring our industry into the 21st century. We talk about how everything is still manual and printing benefit statements, etc. And I think if there's one thing that two-pot's demonstrated is we can digitize. Sure. The industry can be modernized. South Africans do have access to devices, to digital. We've just got to do it right and the correct channel. The other thing that I think is quite important is I did bring through the Australian example, and I've spent the last couple of months spending a bit of time understanding how the Australian system, how well it works. And 35 years ago, they were in the same place we were. Very low coverage rates, sitting at about 50%, employer funds, your structure was dependent on how nice your employer was, and that was really all that was there. And over the last 35 years, they've slowly brought in compulsory contributions, minimum contributions, compulsory membership, to build them to the fourth biggest or the fourth best retirement fund system in the world. But one of the big takeouts for me was the digitization of that industry. And it wasn't the front-end digitization. I mean, that always comes into play. It was how they linked the different funds and the different administrators and the pipes in the back end. And I think that's the thing we need to look at. So it's not just making sure the experience with a member is digitized and working well and smooth and seamless. It's also making sure that the experience between administrators is working well, is smooth and steady. And I think that as an industry is where we need to be looking at what I'm not really calling digitized, but more modernizing.
Sure. And the example that you cited in your presentation was the banks.
Correct.
And they you called it pipes, they're pipes into sharing information. And I'm kind of imagining a world where I can see my retirement fund, I can see my pres fund, I can see my RA, and it might be with different providers, but certainly through different pipes. How far are we away from that?
Sure, I think it's absolutely in the world of digital and with the capabilities that we have, it is an absolute possibility. It's not impossible, it's doable, but similar where BankServe did that for the banks, I think it's going to be something that we need to look at how do we bring that in? Because I don't think one provider can do it on their own. I think that's the big thing is if we want to create links between administrators and retirement funds, it's something that needs to be done collaboratively. But in terms of the actual system capability, building pipes and APIs, I mean, we all do APIs all the time,
Sure.
right? That's what links your systems together. So I think it's something that we need to work closely with the regulators, with policymakers, but I don't think it's not possible at all. In fact, we demonstrated had one of the most advanced banking systems in the world. Why can't we take our retirement fund space there as well?
touching on that, you also said in your presentation that the regulator in Australia said you've got 2 years to get this right, or a period of time to get this right, and if you don't, we're going to sort it out and get it right for you. There's nothing like the right kind of motivation to get stuff done. My question is, do you think the South African context is, let's call it, mature enough to collaborate to an extent like this?
I think what's really important is you've got to create the space for collaboration, because the other problem is you've got all the competition laws and all of that sort of stuff, because you can't have all the players in a room, and so that you've got to do it properly.
Sure.
But essentially, they were at a situation where they had compulsory preservation, people changed jobs plenty during their lifetimes. And so you had members with lots of pots around the industry. Sound familiar? And so it was really hard for people to see where their pots were, to pull it together. So they basically told the industry, sort it out. And because they were given that space to do that with the directive of sort it out or else we'll take over type concept, they did exactly that. So it did take some time of the planning and the organization and investment, but they've now got a situation where you can now log on to through the SARS system, or our SARS, their revenues, it's called something else, but through their tax, they can log on and you can see all your funds. So if you've got preservation funds all over all together, you can see them on one screen. And that's really, we're not saying all the money needs to be in the same place, but at least it needs to be viewed. And that's something that I think as an industry we should be driving, because it'll also help people, it'll reduce your unclaimed benefit problem.
Sure.
It'll increase your member contactability and information. And ultimately, it's in the best interests of members.
So not a one view of client, which is a provider kind of view, rather a one human view
Correct.
of all my finances and wherever they may be. Michelle, thank you very much for taking the time to join us in the podcast booth today. And I look forward to any further conversations we have. Thank you, Old Mutual.
Thank you.